we could see some pockets of frost and, again, some fog patches forming. And that's going to be the issue of the next few days and into the weekend. A lot of dry weather, a lot of cloud, but there will be some fog, and where that fog sticks, well, it really will feel pretty cold.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
I'm Darren McCaffrey, and join me on The Briefing Monday to Thursday at 3 p.m. You'll get your afternoon fix of all the latest political stories, debate and analysis, as well as interviews with some of the biggest names in UK politics.
It's a problem that affects the whole world, Darren.
From Westminster to Cardiff, Edinburgh and Belfast, if it's happening in UK politics, we've got it covered. That's The Briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey, Monday to Thursday, 3 p.m. on GB News.
Join me, Alex Phillips, for the afternoon agenda on GB News, Monday to Thursday from 4 p.m. till 6 p.m. We don't lecture to you or try to tell you what to think. We do a deep delve into a topic with views from across the range of debate, therefore leaving you, the viewer, to make up your own mind. Join me, Alex Phillips, for the afternoon agenda on GB News, 4 till 6, Monday to Thursday. You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hi, I'm Alistair Stewart, and I really hope that you can join me here on GB News. I've been in this game for 40 years and I've made lots of friends, and I try and reflect what they think about the big stories of the day in conversation with me. That's why we call it Alistair Stewart and Friends, and you're a key part of it as well. I always get inundated with emails and messages and texts, and if they're really good, I play them back to you. 12 till 3 every Saturday and Sunday.
A very good afternoon. Welcome to the Briefing PM, live here from Westminster. Coming up in the next hour, the Prime Minister due to host a press conference yet again in Downing Street this afternoon, looking at the booster programme as millions take up the chance to get a booster right across the UK. Also, we'll be looking ahead to a crucial day for Boris Johnson tomorrow in Shropshire, that by-election where the Conservative Party should hold on to that seat, but apparently it's all terribly competitive, with the Lib Dems reckoning they're in with a chance. And additionally, we'll be looking at the fallout from yesterday's vote as nearly 100 Conservative MPs defy the Prime Minister and their own party. It's not looking good for Boris Johnson. We'll be debating that and much else in the next hour, but first let's get the news at 3.
Good afternoon, I'm Tamsin Roberts. This is your news at 3 o'clock. The Prime Minister has defended the decision to introduce COVID passes, describing the move as proportionate and right. 100 Tory MPs voted against the measure, which passed with support from the opposition. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the rebellion exposed a loss of trust in Boris Johnson and the country is burdened with the worst Prime Minister at the worst possible time.
So will the Prime Minister take time this Christmas to look in the mirror and ask himself whether he has the trust and authority to lead this country?
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We won that vote last night with Conservative votes, as I told the House. I respect the feelings and I respect the anxieties that colleagues have about. Of course I do. I respect and understand the anxieties, the legitimate anxieties that colleagues have about restrictions on their liberty. But I believe, and on the liberty of people. But I believe that the approach that we're taking is balanced and proportionate and right for this country.
Well, the Prime Minister is due to make a statement at 5 p.m. today, updating the nation on the COVID situation. He's also expected to further push the booster programme. All over 18s are now able to book their booster jab if their second vaccine was 3 months ago. The woman who killed 16-month-old Star Hobson in West Yorkshire is due to be sentenced. 28-year-old Savannah Brockhill was branded pure evil by Star's family after she was found guilty of murdering the toddler. Her mother and Brockhill's former partner, 20-year-old Frankie Smith, was cleared of murder but convicted of allowing her child's death. One person has died and a number of others are still unaccounted for following a fire in Reading last night. Witnesses say people jumping from the burning building, and one resident says he had a miracle escape by jumping from the 3rd floor. A 31-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder and arson. The cost of living has surged this month as inflation reached its highest level in a decade. The Consumer Price Index is up to 5.1% this month, up from 4.2% in October. That's according to the Office for National Statistics. The increase was led by a steep rise in fuel prices, as well as clothing, food and second-hand cars.
So it is high, and again, if you look at what's happening with wages, which we published yesterday, although in October wages were increasing above the rate of inflation by about 1.7%, having higher inflation, if all things being equal, it may be that actually wages are going to start going either at or slightly below inflation over the next few months.
A campaigner has lost a challenge against the government over gender-neutral passports. Christy Ellen Kane pushed for more than 25 years to achieve legal and social recognition for non-gendered identity. In a case, it has reached the highest court in the land. However, the Supreme Court found that UK law doesn't recognise a non-gendered category of individual, and allowing X passports would cause legal issues in confirming an individual's identity. They unanimously denied the case. 7 times Formula One world champion Lewis Hamilton has been knighted by the Prince of Wales today for his services to motorsports. It's just days after the British sports star controversially lost out on a record 8th F1 world title. The 36-year-old attended the investiture at Windsor Castle. Well, those are the top stories. I'll have the latest headlines for you in half an hour. Now, though, it's back to the briefing with Darren McCaffrey.
Very good afternoon. Welcome to the Briefing PM, live here from outside Parliament in Westminster. Coming up on a busy hour on the programme, we'll be looking ahead to that press conference for the Prime Minister later on today. It comes as scientists warn that the Omicron variant is now probably the most significant threat since the pandemic began. We'll be looking at the political fallout from yesterday's vote in which almost 100 Conservative MPs defied their party. We'll have a recap of Prime Minister's question time today. And also looking ahead to that crucial by-election in Shropshire tomorrow. We'll be speaking to Alistair Carmichael about whether the Lib Dems can grab that seat from the Tories. And we'll be looking at the impacts that the new advice is having in Scotland and in Wales. That advice to limit the number of households that you mix with in the run-up to Christmas. That and so much more over the next hour. As always, want to hear your views on the big issues of the day. You can email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tweet us at gbnews, and we'll get to some of those a little later in the programme. But a very good afternoon on this Wednesday. Welcome to the programme. But first, we're going to start with some breaking news actually on the programme within the last couple of minutes. David Fuller has been sentenced to a full life sentence. He, of course, was behind a double murder back in the 1980s. He's also been found guilty of sexually abusing more than 100 female corpses. He will die in jail. That is essentially what the judge has handed down at Maidstone Crown Court, and we can cross over to Ellie Costello, who is outside at the courthouse for us this afternoon. Ellie, just bring us up to date with the latest breaking news.
Hi Darren, yes, this has been described as one of the worst cases in Britain's criminal history. David Fuller has today been sentenced for 2 murders of 2 women in the 1980s and for sexually abusing 102 dead bodies in morgues in 2 Kent hospitals over the past 12 years. That sentence has just been handed down at Maidstone Crown Court here. David Fuller will serve 2 whole life orders for the murders of 25-year-old Wendy Nell and 20-year-old Caroline Pearce in 1987. And he will also serve 12 years for necrophilia, and that will run concurrently with the 2 whole life orders. And the judge said that she was handing him this severe sentence to ensure that he would spend the rest of his life in jail. He is now a 67-year-old man, and a whole life sentence of this kind is very rare in this country. In the UK, there are about 60 prisoners on a whole life order such as this one, but the judge said that in this case she was satisfied that it has met the standard for the most severe life sentence to be applied. She said the fact that those murders were premeditated, they were planned and included a sexual motivation, that is why she handed him that longest possible sentence. And court opened at 10 o'clock this morning. The courthouse was full of victims' families, and it began actually with 3 hours of victim impact statements from those families. It started with those of the 2 murdered women in 1987 and then went on to families of those 102 female bodies that were sexually abused in the morgue. I wanted to bring you that heartbreaking testimony from the youngest victim, a 9-year-old little girl in one of the morgues in Kent that David Fuller abused. The mum was crying as she directed her words to Fuller directly. She said, "You are so disgusting, it doesn't even appear in a normal person's imagination. I hoped my baby would be able to say no to a 66-year-old man who was abusing her body, but she couldn't as she was already dead." And she pleaded with the judge, "Please stand up for my baby girl who I miss and love with everything that I have." So the judge, Mrs. Justice Bobby Chima Grubb, said to David Fuller that his violations go against everything that is right and humane, and they are incomprehensible. And to that, she handed him those 2 full life orders and 12-year sentence for necrophilia as well. But for the murders, for the families of those 2 murdered women, and of course for the 102 abused female bodies, this is a life sentence that they all must bear too.
Yeah, incomprehensible indeed, Ellie. Absolutely horrific case. Ellie Costello there joining us from Maidstone Crown Court with that breaking news. David Fuller will spend the rest of his life in prison. Let's move on to the politics today. Of course, it is Wednesday. It was the final Prime Minister's Question Time before Christmas, and a real toss-up with Keir Starmer having a pop at the Prime Minister, claiming that he had lost the trust of his own MPs and his authority to lead the country. Let's look back at some of the highlights from PMQs today.
Given the seriousness of the situation, does the Prime Minister agree that the 100 Conservative members who voted against Plan B measures last night voted against steps which are necessary to protect the NHS and to protect lives.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government is taking a balanced and a proportionate approach to dealing with the pandemic, and the House voted through Plan B, I think, with Conservative votes, Mr. Speaker, and we will continue with the massive booster rollout, to which he is a late convert. Since Friday, when I decided that we had to accelerate the booster programme in view of the data about Omicron, we've cut the timetable in half. Mr. Speaker, Monday was the biggest vaccination Monday in the history of this country, and yesterday was the second biggest vaccination achievement by the NHS ever. More than 500,000 jabs delivered, and the campaign continues to grow.
Mr. Speaker, we all hope that combined with the booster programme, Plan B will be sufficient to prevent the NHS from being overwhelmed. Nobody wants to see further restrictions, but the Prime Minister has quite rightly not ruled anything out. So can I take this opportunity to make clear to the Prime Minister that if further votes are needed to save lives and protect the NHS, Labour MPs will follow my leadership and we will always put the national interest first. Can I ask the Prime Minister to get his house in order so he can say the same about the members behind him?
As for following his leadership, Mr. Speaker, they wibbled-wobbled over Plan B, they wibble-wobbled over quarantine, and if we'd listened to him, Mr. Speaker, we wouldn't even have the vaccine rollout, because we would have remained in the European Medicines Agency. And we wouldn't have opened up on July the 19th, Mr. Speaker. We would have remained in lockdown. That's
the Labour Party showed the leadership yesterday that the Prime Minister lacked. Mr. Speaker, if it wasn't for Labour votes, his government wouldn't have been able to introduce vital health measures we need to save lives and protect the NHS. So weak is his leadership. His own MPs were wrong to vote against basic public health measures. But I can understand why they're angry with him. After all, the Health Secretary said this summer that relaxations of restrictions were irreversible. They weren't. Only last week, the government...
Order. I've been tempted by both of you a little bit too much. Think it's Christmas. That's the only reason you're going to remain Prime Minister. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, only last week the government was saying Plan B measures were not required. They are. Just like the rail revolution for the North. No one will have to sell their homes for social care. Just like no tax rises. It's overpromise after overpromise until reality catches up.
Goes again. He comes to this House pompously claiming that he wants to rise above party politics and support the efforts of the nation in delivering the vaccine rollout, and then he talks endlessly about party politics and plays political games. I think what the people of this country can see is as a result of what this government has done, with the decisions we've taken, the tough decisions that we've taken to deliver which he ducked, Mr. Speaker, to deliver the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe and now the fastest booster rollout.
And just a reminder that we are going to hear from the Prime Minister alongside Chris Whitty at a press conference at 5 o'clock this afternoon. Of course, we'll have full coverage of that on GB News. It comes on a day in which it was announced that a record number of booster jabs were delivered yesterday. Some 656,711 jabs across the UK. Let's look at PMQs, get post-match analysis. Tom Harwood is joining us, himself in self-isolation. Good afternoon to you, Tom. It wasn't a classic, was it? What did you make of the last PMQs of 2021?
I have to say, I think that the ding-dong between Keir Starmer and Boris Johnson was one of the best and most enthusiastic ding-dongs that we have seen for quite a while in Prime Minister's questions. There was some really good back and forth, attacks, counter-attacks, cheers, jeers, even though the House of Commons chamber was a little bit thin on the ground. Of course, COVID has been sweeping through Westminster this week. Many MPs, many shadow cabinet ministers, the leader of the Liberal Democrats as well, all off with COVID. No doubt Many MPs saying that they don't want to turn up in the chamber for such an event, but even so, it was still pretty raucous. One interesting point, I think, though, after the Prime Minister and Keir Starmer had their back and forth, a well worth watching back and forth in its entirety, was the lack of support, perhaps, from Conservative MPs towards the Prime Minister in questions unrelated to COVID. Liam Fox asking a relatively hostile question. Similarly, Tom Tugendhat asking a hostile question over cuts to the Foreign Office. So really, potentially, we're seeing a little bit of a strained relationship between backbenchers and the Prime Minister.
Just finally and quickly, Tom, if you can, though there was an attempt, I think, by Tory MPs, there was lots of cheering for the Prime Minister, foot stamping, to show that there was support on the backbenchers after, of course, that very, very difficult vote last night.
Certainly, lots of shouts of more at the end of the Prime Minister and Keir Starmer's back and forth. In fact, the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, had to sort of really shush the Tory benches down. So loud were they shouting more, more, after Boris Johnson's really quite impressive peroration, countering the attacks from Keir Starmer with news about the economy, about the number of jobs. Although, of course, that's a little bit dampened today with 5.1% inflation. Not all rosy on the economic side.
Tom, appreciate your thoughts. Take care. Tom Harwood there joining us from South London. Well, let's turn to a big by-election tomorrow in Shropshire. Another test for the Prime Minister. It is a safe Conservative seat, but there is a battle underway, a proper battle underway, and our reporter Balvinda Sidhu has been in the constituency getting a feel for the mood on the grounds.
People in Oswestry in North Shropshire are getting ready for Christmas, but before that they have to choose their next MP. This by-election has been triggered by the resignation of Owen Paterson, who broke the parliamentary rules on paid lobbying. He's been the MP here for 24 years. This seat in North Shropshire has been held by the Conservatives for nearly 200 years. It's considered an ultra-safe seat. In the last general election, Owen Paterson safely won with 63% of the vote. But will the Tory sleaze row and that alleged Christmas party change people's voting habits here?
Based on obviously what's gone on in the last few weeks and Boris's behaviour over the last few days, and we won't be voting Tory anymore now. We're going to change our mind now.
I know there's a really good female candidate standing, and I would never necessarily have looked at that party. However, I do think that her values and what she's standing for are fantastic.
I've always voted Tory. Yes, well, you've got to stick by them thick and thin. I don't believe in kicking anyone when they're down.
I've had a few people in saying that they will not be voting Conservative this time, which I find interesting. We'll see whether that comes up in the numbers and whether it's a big enough swing for it to go Lib Dem or Green.
North Shropshire is a large rural constituency lying on the Welsh border. It's made up of 5 market towns: Wem, Whitchurch, Oswestry, Ellesmere and Market Drayton. At a hustings event in Whitchurch, people shared the issues they want their next MP to prioritise.
We lost our ambulance station some years ago, and then Market Drayton, which is about 25 minutes away, lost theirs more recently, so we have no facilities for the ambulances to get to us quickly.
A total change of the mainline parties, because every one of them's let us down. They've locked us down for 2 years. My own beef is with Boris Johnson. I think most of what he's done is a shambles.
We have got one doctor's surgery to cater for nearly 10,000 people. Our own surgery closed in March and was never reopened.
Standing for the Tories is Dr Neil Shastri Hurst, a former military doctor, now a barrister and a new dad.
I think I bring my experience, having worked on the front line of the NHS, having worked in the military, and more recently having worked as a barrister, to advocate effectively on behalf of people here in North Shropshire. There's been a lot of mudslinging, political mudslinging in this campaign, but actually I'm the only candidate who's put forward clear positive plan for North Shropshire. And finally, I'm absolutely committed, cast iron guarantee, this is where we're going to live as a family, this is where I'm going to raise my now 7-week-old son.
Ben Wood was born and raised in North Shropshire and says he wants to bring decency back to politics.
I am fighting in this election for the future of North Shropshire, for our public services and for new opportunities in the area. And that's exactly what I'm doing between now and polling day. People are saying to me they want a sense of decency back in their politics. And it's got to start at a local level, but you know what, it goes right up to the Prime Minister as well. And that's what we're trying to start here, bring back a sense of decency into our politics.
But the bookies suggest that the Lib Dems have a real chance of pulling off what would be a huge upset. Now, we have tried to speak to Helen Morgan, but she hasn't been available, so we caught up with senior Liberal Democrat MP Christine Jardine.
She is someone who will be out there listening to the community all the time, talking to them all year round, listening to what they have to say about GP waiting times, about the strain that the ambulance service is under at the moment, about the pressures on the farming community. Helen appreciates these things. She will be out there. She will be working for people who at the moment feel completely taken for granted by a Conservative government.
Standing for the Green Party is Duncan Kerr, who says he wants to improve local services.
It's all about bringing the community together, I think. We've been rather neglected for too many years. We've got some fantastic people and some fantastic businesses. We've got great food producers, for instance, but we've not had an MP to really celebrate and bring that together. We need to get the public transport sorted out. The bus service is incredibly poor around here.
Voters will go to the polls tomorrow and will find out the result on Friday morning, just before Christmas.
That was Balvinda Sidhu reporting there. There are 14 candidates standing in the North Shropshire by-election. Their names currently on your screens. You can also see them, if you wish, on our website. And we'll have full coverage here on GB News with myself and Balvinda throughout the night on Thursday and to Friday morning, as they promises to be a fascinating by-election, not just for the people of North Shropshire, but indeed for the country at large. So full coverage here on GB News. Let's bring you up to date with some more breaking news. Another courthouse in another part of the country, another horrific case, and that is that Savannah Brockhill has been jailed at Bradford Crown Court for life with a minimum term of 25 years for the murder of 16-year-old Star Hobson. As Star's mother, Frankie Smith, was jailed for 8 years for causing or allowing the child's death. As I say, an horrific case, this, with the very latest details of what has just happened at Bradford Crown Court. We can join our reporter Kevin Larkin, who is there. Kevin, just bring us up to date.
Yes, Darren, as you said, within the last few moments, we have heard that Savannah Brockhill has been sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of Star Hobson. She will serve a minimum term of 25 years, less than 443 days she has served on remand already. And she was told in court, you may in fact serve a great deal longer. As for Frankie Smith, the mum of Star Hobson, she's been sentenced to 8 years in prison for causing or allowing Star's death, and she will have to serve 2/3 of that before she could be released on licence. It was obviously a harrowing and very emotive session in court with very many impact statements. 3 impact statements were read out from people in the court. One of the most emotional came from Bernard Hobson, who is Star's paternal grandfather, and he described a sunny, happy and beautiful baby girl, sweet and affectionate, always smiling, and often had to stop at points because he was so emotional. Said she was loved by all members of the family, and he described how they will never have another Christmas with Star, and described the delight on her face last Christmas when she was living with them as she sat among her many presents. And he described also that Star never had the chance to call him the grandma and granddad. Very, very emotive tales from inside the court, and we are expecting more reaction to those sentences very shortly.
OK, Kevin, thank you very much indeed for that. Kevin Larkin there joining us from Bradford Crown Court. OK, well, that's it for the moment on the briefing. We're going to take a quick commercial break. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we'll be looking at the Lib Dems and their prospects in North Shropshire. Plus, we'll be debating the new guidance and measures in Scotland and Wales. That and a lot more after we get the weather on this Wednesday afternoon from the Met Office.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. The forecast for tomorrow will be similar for the next several days, actually. Dry for the vast majority, but also fairly drab. Won't be completely dry tomorrow. There will be some rain across the north of Scotland being created by this weather front. But it's high pressure that is starting to dominate across the south. And over the next few days, that high will continue to move northwards and control our weather through the weekend and beyond. That weather from those still providing some rain and drizzle over Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland through the rest of this evening. It's gradually going to work north overnight, so turning drier in Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, so maybe some drizzle over the mountains of Wales. Generally a lot of cloud here, but with some clearer skies across northeast England. Temperatures could get close to freezing, certainly in rural areas, and there could be some stubborn fog patches here, so through parts of Yorkshire and Lincolnshire in particular. And if we do see some fog here, well, it may well last for much of Thursday. We should see that cloud and rain starting to pull away from northern Scotland, likely to stay fairly damp in Shetland for most of the day. But elsewhere, as I said at the start, it is generally cloudy but dry. Temperatures still a touch above average, although not quite as mild as today. And if that fog does stick around, well, temperatures could be very much more suppressed. Through Thursday evening, again, a few holes in the cloud could allow some fog patches to form, parts of North Wales and, again, the northeastern quarter of the UK. Generally just a lot of cloud across the south as we head into Friday. That weather front moving away from northern Scotland, so generally dry by the odd little bit of drizzle here and there. Again, some stubborn fog patches are possible on Friday. Again, some brightness, particularly across northern Scotland. Should be fairly sunny for the Highlands across to Aberdeenshire. North Wales also may well see some sunny spells, but for most places it's just looking overcast and grey, as it will do into the weekend. Increasing chance of seeing some thick fog, but generally staying dry and cloudy, but also steadily turning colder.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Very good afternoon. Welcome back to the briefing here on GB News. The time is 3:30. We're live outside Parliament. And it really is the depths of winter, isn't it, when it starts getting dark at 3:30 in the afternoon. Let's move back, I should say, to that by-election in North Shropshire tomorrow. Going to be a crucial test for Boris Johnson. As we say, this should be a ultra-safe Conservative seat. Owen Paterson was the MP there for decades. I think he had a 23,000 vote majority. It voted heavily to leave the European Union. And yet, there is a battle on, with the Lib Dems suggesting that they potentially could be giving the Conservatives a run for their money. Let's get the feeling, the sense of what it's like on the ground there, and join our correspondent who is there for us. A very good afternoon to you, Bavinda. Just give us a sense of what the mood is, because often in by-elections, what you find more often than not is people aren't terribly interested. Apathy is the main thing.
That's right, Darren. I mean, there's a real mixed bag of feelings here. There are some people who are saying they're not going to bother voting tomorrow because they're just completely frustrated and disenchanted with what's happening at Westminster. And then there are those who are saying they're going to stick with what they've always known. And then there are others who are going to use this by-election to send a message to central government and will be switching parties for the first time in a long time. Now, this is a stronghold for the Conservatives. It's been here for nearly 200 years, and in the last election Owen Paterson won by 24,000 votes. That's a big number that has to be that people have to vote in order to change hands here. So it all remains open. People are predicting it to be a close race, and it'll very much depend on turnout tomorrow. Are enough people going to go out and vote? And that depends on a number of factors. The weather usually being one. It looks like a clear day tomorrow, so that should help. But the other is, there are some concerns that some people might not go out and vote because of this new variant, Omicron. They'd rather stay at home and stay safe. But, the authorities here are saying that the polling stations do have COVID-safe measures in place, so people do not need to worry about that, and they should go out and use their vote. But it's open. It's an open race, and we'll find out more. It's going. The national spotlight is on North Shropshire. Some people I've been speaking to here today feel like, North Shropshire is being forgotten once again, while the focus is on what's happening in Westminster. They don't want their issues, their local issues, to be convoluted with what's happening nationally. But like I said, it's expected to be a close one. So we'll find out, on Friday morning.
Yeah, the wee small hours of Friday morning. Bavinda, thank you very much indeed. Bavinda Sidhu there, our reporter in Shropshire, and I'll be with her, as I say, tomorrow and into Friday, looking at those results and the potential political fallout from it. OK, we're going to pause on the briefing. It's just after 3:30. Let's bring you up to date with the very latest news and head back to the studio.
Good afternoon, I'm Tamsin Roberts. Here are the latest headlines. 28-year-old Savannah Brockhill has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 25 years for the murder of 16-month-old Star Hobson. The toddler was assaulted and psychologically abused for months before suffering catastrophic injuries in her home in West Yorkshire. Her mother and Brockhill's former partner, 20-year-old Frankie Smith, was cleared of murder but sentenced to 8 years for causing or allowing her child's death. A double murderer who sexually abused the bodies of more than 100 women and girls aged between 9 and 100 has been sentenced to a whole life term. 67-year-old David Fuller beat and strangled to death Wendy Nell and Caroline Pierce before sexually assaulting them in separate attacks in Tunbridge Wells in 1987. He was caught 33 years later after a DNA breakthrough. The Prime Minister has defended the decision to introduce COVID passes, describing the move as proportionate and right. 100 Tory MPs voted against the measure, which passed with support from the opposition. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the rebellion has exposed a loss of trust in Boris Johnson. Thames Valley Police say it's highly unlikely any further survivors will be found after a fire in Reading killed one person and left another number of others unaccounted for. Witnesses say people were jumping from the burning building, and one resident says he had a miracle escape by leaping from the third floor. A 31-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder and arson. 7-time Formula One world champion Lewis Hamilton has been knighted by the Prince of Wales for his services to motorsports. He's been honoured just days after controversially losing out on a record 8th F1 world title. The 36-year-old attended the investiture at Windsor Castle with his mother. That's all for now. We'll have a full update for you at the top of the hour.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Very welcome back to the briefing here on GB News. The time 20 minutes to 4 o'clock. We're live outside Parliament. In the last hour or so, it's been announced that the retired Court of Appeal judge and crossbench life peer, Baroness Heather Hallett, will now chair the public inquiry into the COVID-19 pandemic. Boris Johnson just announcing that in the last hour. So that is Baroness Heather Hallett is going to chair that big investigation into the pandemic. It's promised to start, of course, I think around April time next year, though that timeline, depending, of course, on what happens in the weeks to months to come, could change. But that will be a very interesting public inquiry. OK, let's return back to the Shropshire by-election. The Lib Dems reckon they're onto one there, that they could potentially unseat the Conservatives in what has traditionally been a safe seat. Let's speak to the Lib Dem MP, Alistair Carmichael, who joins us. Very good afternoon to you, Alistair. Let's start with that Shropshire by-election. How tight do you reckon it's going to be?
Well, I mean, I've been a couple of times, and certainly there is a lot of momentum behind the campaign for the Liberal Democrats in North Shropshire, but it is a massive mountain for us to climb. I think it's pretty clear that if anybody is going to knock out the Conservatives in North Shropshire on Thursday, then it will be the Liberal Democrats. But everything that I've seen about it and everything that I hear tells me that it could be very, very tight. But, you know, in a seat that at the last election had a majority of almost 23,000, then actually very, very tight is a win in itself.
If you don't win, or if the Labour Party don't win, many people will argue it's because of a split vote. Is it a matter of regret, potentially, that actually one or either party didn't step aside?
No, look, I mean, I think we've tried this before, and ultimately the people who have to make these decisions are the voters, and no political party should ever presume that the voters of one party will automatically transfer to their support to another party. I certainly, on the visits that I've made to North Shropshire, I've spoken to a lot of people who were previously Labour voters who said that they would vote Liberal Democrat this time. They would lend us their support because they could see from the scale and just the sheer excitement and momentum that there is behind the Liberal Democrat campaign in North Shropshire that we were the people who were most likely to beat the Conservatives. And I think it's better that the voters make these decisions rather than the political parties should.
OK, moving on to what's happening with the pandemic at the moment. Clearly there is a lot of concern within government. We're going to have a press conference from the Prime Minister and Chris Whitty at 5 p.m. This afternoon. Do you think the government should be potentially imposing more restrictions, even in the run-up to Christmas?
They've got to take the advice. We've got to be told just how serious it's going to be. And of course, nobody should take this lightly. The concern I have is that you saw this in the House of Commons chamber yesterday. There is almost a mood within government at the moment that something has to be done, rather than that necessarily we just stick to the basics and try and get them right. Their policy on vaccine passports yesterday was a classic example of that. There is no evidence that vaccine passports will actually help in terms of transmission, or even, as they maybe occasionally suggest, that it will increase more people to actually get vaccinated, which is, that's what we need to do here. Basically, we've known right from day one that you'll beat this pandemic by sticking to the basics. You vaccinate as many people as you can, you test, trace and isolate, and you support people if they have then got to isolate, and that affects their ability to earn their living. Everything else is just a gimmick. Let's get rid of the gimmicks, stick to the basics, and I think in that way we'll come out the other side of this.
Fascinating you think that vaccine passports are a gimmick. They're in place in France, they're in place in Germany, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Italy, Spain. I mean, we could go on. Clearly, most countries in Europe don't think they're a gimmick.
A lot of countries in Europe are using them, but a lot of countries in Europe, use them in the context of their own, the way in which they run their countries. France, for example, has had an identity card system for generations, and we've never had that in this country. If you see the way in which they have been used in Scotland and in Wales, at a practical level, they have very often been problematic for the people they're actually using them. I was speaking to one young person just last week who told me that she'd not been unable to get into a pub at the weekend because they wanted to see a vaccine passport, and it said that her vaccine information had expired, whatever that meant. You hear these sort of stories, but look, the real danger with vaccine passports is that they create this false sense of security. They let people go into social settings where they will feel that they are safe, and that will affect the way in which they behave. Whereas, in fact, we know that even amongst those who are double vaccinated, there can still be a high level of people carrying and transmitting the virus. In relation to the Delta variant, that was as high as 40%. So, I just don't see. I'm all for responsible restrictions. If we need to curtail our freedoms in order to to get through this, then that's what we should do. But we shouldn't just be doing things that are actually not going to have a practical effect at the end of the day, just so that governments can tick the box and say, we've done something here.
OK, Alistair, appreciate your time and your thoughts this afternoon. Alistair Carmichael there, Lib Dem MP, on the Lib Dem's position on vaccine passports. Let's move away from the pandemic for a moment and focus on this so-called British Bill of Rights. We know Dominic Raab, the Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary, has launching a 3-month consultation into potential big changes to the Bill of Rights in this country. But it must be said, many opposition groups and parties are branding this as a blatant power grab by the government. Well, is it? Let's get the thoughts of Professor Andrew Tettingbourne. He is from the University of Swansea and joins us now. Good afternoon to you, Andrew. A power grab by the state is the critics' claim. What do you reckon?
Well, my view is actually that's pretty arrant nonsense. This was a statement made by the person who runs Liberty, who essentially said this is some sort of power grab. But you've got to think of a number of other matters. One is that we've had the convention, the European Convention on Human Rights, for 70 years. We've had the Human Rights Act for something over 20 years. There's certainly room to look at them again to see whether they're doing what we want them to do. The other point which you do have to note is that in the 70 years we've had the European Convention on Human Rights, we've had a very, very active European Court of Human Rights, which has enormously extended the reach of the Convention, so that there are vast numbers of matters today which are governed by human rights law, which no one would ever have dreamed of being so governed in, say, 1950 or 1960. So, human rights have grown. What started out as Asterix has turned into something like Obelix. And I think there is very much room.
Andrew.
So, yeah. So,
well, you listen to the president of the Law Society of England and Wales saying that, this should be led by evidence rather than political rhetoric. And there is a sense that the government are doing this for political reasons, not least around migration.
There is, that's quite right. And I'm going to be quite blunt with you. There's every reason why reforms like this should be done for political reasons. If you say something is a human right, the result is essentially to take it out of the political process, to say that the government must do something or mustn't do something, even if the majority of voters want it or don't want it. Now, it's a perfectly legitimate political point to make that decisions of this sort should be made by our elected representatives and not by an unelected collection of judges and human rights lawyers in Strasbourg. So I'm afraid I'm simply not with the Law Society there.
OK, Professor Andrew Tettingbourne, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts on that, and we'll be getting back to you as that consultation weaves its way, and I'm sure this will be a big political issue in the new year. That's Professor Andrew Tettingbourne there from the University of Swansea. Now, yesterday we heard from Nicola Sturgeon, didn't we, in Scotland, in which she talked about big changes, significant changes of advice to people there, telling them not to mix with more than 3 households when they meet inside, and also that social distancing should return to things like bars and restaurants. A big impact on the hospitality industry in the run-up to Christmas, the busiest time of the year. Well, let's speak to Stephen Montgomery. He is from the Scottish Hospitality Group. Very good afternoon to you. What was your reaction when you heard the First Minister yesterday?
I think it was one of, not shocked, I think it was, we actually expected a bit more, but no matter what way you look at it, we've been hit another devastating blow, and that's just ever since the Public Health Scotland announcement came last Thursday, where we've seen a tsunami of cancellations come through right the way towards the end of Christmas and New Year. So even as we speak now, we still haven't received any guidance on what the rules and regulations will be. So we wait that to come as soon as possible, so we can get that out to the businesses and also out to the general public so they know what to expect.
In saying that, you talked about a tsunami of cancellations. The counterpoint, of course, that Nicola Sturgeon puts is that they're looking at a tsunami of cases of this new variant Omicron, and that if they don't act now, we could be in for even tougher restrictions later. So actually being cautious now, in many regards, may well mean that those businesses can at least remain open.
Yes, I totally get that, and nobody within hospitality is taking a line where we would put anything about profit before health. That has never been the case within hospitality, and we've always remained a safe place to be. But if you want to give restrictions or by stealth or by the back door, whatever, you need to fund it as well to protect jobs and protect the business. And to come out with £100 million yesterday is nowhere near the support that's needed to protect the jobs of those people working within the hospitality business, and never mind the business. And it wouldn't even cover the wholesale costs of what we've lost in the last 5 days.
OK, it is a tough time for your businesses, and I saw some Tom Kerridge, I think, the top chef today, suggesting that he's had hundreds of cancellations in the last couple of days in the run-up to Christmas. Stay safe, though, and hopefully people will still turn up to your restaurants and bars in the days leading up to Christmas, of course, in a safe fashion. That's Stephen Montgomery there from the Scottish Hospitality Group. Well, let's go from Scotland now to Wales, because we also heard a pretty similar statement from Mark Drayford, the First Minister there, again encouraging people to try and limit their social interactions as much as they could. Let's speak to Richard Taylor, a fan of the programme, who we have on quite regularly, who is not a fan, I think it's fair to say, of Mark Drayford, or indeed of his new advice, I assume, Richard.
Absolutely not. You know, we've had the most draconian measures here, Darren, for quite some time in Wales. I mean, England, of course, vaccine passports been introduced and mandatory mask wearing. We've had that here in Wales for a very long time. And of course, the impact it's had on local businesses. And of course, the bigger argument is over people's social and civil liberties. I know I keep banging on about it here on GB News, but it's an important thing to me because I'm an advocate for freedoms. And I do believe that these restrictions are an overreaction to something really, even though cases are up to 62 here in Wales currently, Darren. Of course, we haven't seen anyone seriously die from this Omicron virus. So, you know, we've got to put things into perspective here. And I think Friday, Mark Drayford will address the nation of Wales again. We don't really know what he's going to say. There are rumours that he'll make some further restrictions. That's households meeting together and such forth. Potentially hitting the hospitality industry as well, as he did in previous restrictions when he said pubs could open but they couldn't sell alcohol, or they couldn't open past a certain time. So we're going to see further restrictions here in Wales, undoubtedly, because of the precautionary nature that Mark Drayford always seems to take here when we're faced with this virus.
Well, you pointed the right word there, isn't it? It is caution in many regards, and we don't really know the full details of potentially how deadly or maybe mild this new variant can be, but we do know it's definitely more transmissible. Anecdotally, here in London, you know, I've heard of lots of people who have contracted the virus in the last week or so. That is going to happen in the rest of the country in the days and weeks to come. So isn't it sensible to be cautious, particularly even at this time of the year when people are seeing relatives?
I don't think so, because I think it's creating a culture of fear, Darren. You know, we've got to learn to live with this virus. Majority of those that have this Omicron, including Tom Howard, one of your presenters here on GB News as well, it's just like a cold. That's what I'm hearing. You mentioned anecdotally here in Wales. I know people have got it here in Wales, or people who know people have got it, and it's anecdotal, because it's anecdotal in the sense that they literally catch it, they get a sore throat, bad head, tired. I mean, what happened to the flu? What happened to the cold? We learned to live with this, and all of a sudden we've gone into this fear mode and panic mode over something that literally has not killed anybody. And the reports this week in the BBC of someone in hospital who died with Omicron, not from Omicron. It seemed as if the narrative was over someone who had died from it. And I think that the whole idea of pushing fear, Boris Johnson at 8 p.m. on a Sunday night, to make that statement. And I believe he's going to make one tonight at 5 p.m. It's just scaring people. And this has got to stop. The government clearly have no strategy. Public confidence in Boris Johnson is at an all-time low, and that's going to continue. We're going to see that in North Shropshire, I believe, with the parties splitting the vote and taking votes away from the Conservatives, like the Reclaim Party with Martin Dewdney, who's standing there, Reform Party.
Oh, and we have unfortunately lost Richard, but we were running out of time. But there you go. That was Richard Taylor. Apologies for losing that link to him. Of course, we are going to hear from Chris Whitty and the scientists, who are rather alarmed by this new variant, at 5 o'clock here on GB News. Let's just bring you up to date with some of the emails you've been getting in touch with us. Ben says that a third of Londoners are unvaccinated, perhaps explains much of the government's reaction to COVID that seems puzzlingly illogical. How and why is this appalling fact been hidden from public view until now? Sheila on the Bill of Rights saying we need a new Bill of Rights badly. We can't stop the boats and we can't stop lawyers blocking deportations. Always get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. That press conference at 5 and back tomorrow. Up next, it's the afternoon agenda. But first, here's the weather this Wednesday.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. The forecast for tomorrow will be similar for the next several days, actually. Dry for the vast majority, but also fairly drab. Won't be completely dry tomorrow. There will be some rain across the north of Scotland being created by this weather front. But it's high pressure that is starting to dominate across the south. And over the next few days, that high will continue to move northwards and control our weather through the weekend and beyond. That weather from those still providing some rain and drizzle over Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland through the rest of this evening. It's gradually going to work north overnight, so turning drier in Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, so maybe some drizzle over the mountains of Wales. Generally a lot of cloud here, but with some clearer skies across northeast England. Temperatures could get close to freezing, certainly in rural areas, and there could be some stubborn fog patches here, so through parts of Yorkshire and Lincolnshire in particular. And if we do see some fog here, well, it may well last for much of Thursday. We should see that cloud and rain starting to pull away from northern Scotland, likely to stay fairly damp in Shetland for most of the day. But elsewhere, as I said at the start, it is generally cloudy but dry. Temperatures still a touch above average, although not quite as mild as today. And if that fog does stick around, well, temperatures could be very much more suppressed. Through Thursday evening, again, a few holes in the cloud could allow some fog patches to form, parts of North Wales and, again, the northeastern quarter of the UK. Generally just a lot of cloud across the south as we head into Friday. That weather front moving away from northern Scotland, so generally dry by the odd little bit of drizzle here and there. Again, some stubborn fog patches are possible on Friday. Again, some brightness, particularly across northern Scotland. Should be fairly sunny for the Highlands across to Aberdeenshire. North Wales also may well see some sunny spells, but for most places it's just looking overcast and grey, as it will do into the weekend. Increasing chance of seeing some thick fog, but generally staying dry and cloudy, but also steadily turning colder.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Afternoon Agenda with me, Patrick Christie's, in for Alex Phillips. Now this show, of course, if you don't know already, is all about discussion and debate on things that are or should be on your agenda. So with that in mind, here's what we'll be covering today. Multiple failings in the case of little Star Hobson. As her murderer is sentenced to 25 years in jail, we'll be speaking to experts about how we can protect our children better, which we desperately need to. More migrants attempt the perilous Channel crossing as traffickers take advantage of the calmer weather. We'll have the latest live from Dover, where they're expecting a surge in attempts to get to the UK. And after a series of high-profile and devastating cases of abuse, we need to talk about lockdown kids. Should the government publish a plan for at-risk children following the new COVID restrictions, especially if schools are due to close and we may well go back into another lockdown? We need to get to the bottom of this tonight, ladies and gentlemen, and that's the agenda, of course, for the next hour. But what's on yours? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. But first, it's time for your latest headlines.
Good afternoon, I'm Polly Middlehurst and this is your GB News at 4 o'clock. The woman who murdered 16-month-old Star Hobson in West Yorkshire has been jailed for life. 28-year-old Savannah Brockhill has been given a minimum term of 25 years. The toddler was assaulted and psychologically abused for months before suffering catastrophic injuries. Her mother and Brockhill's former partner, 20-year-old Frankie Smith, was cleared of murder but sentenced to 8 years for causing or allowing her child's death.
Throughout her short life, Star was subjected to endless physical assaults and psychological harm. Instead of the love and protection, she experienced a world of humiliation, cruelty and pain at the hands of those who should have protected her the most. It is impossible to imagine how any parent or carer could inflict this pain and suffering on an entirely defenceless little girl.
Well, in other news today, a double murderer who sexually abused the bodies of more than 100 women aged between 9 and 100 years old has been sentenced to a whole life term. 67-year-old David Fuller killed Wendy Nell and Caroline Pierce before sexually assaulting them in 2 separate attacks in Tunbridge Wells in 1987. He was caught 33 years later after a DNA breakthrough. The Prime Minister has defended the decision